So welcome to effective communication when addressing bullying.
A little bit about PACER. PACER is a trusted source of information and training and support for families of children with disabilities. Our services help families and youth navigate special education and other complex systems. We discover assistive technology solutions and access bullying prevention resources. PACER is Minnesota's Parent Training and Information Center, so information today is Minnesota specific. There is a Parent Training and Information Center in every state, so if you are from out of state, I encourage you to look up your own state information so that way your information is current and relevant. Oh, and it's a, and there's me again. Okay, a little bit about myself. My name is Colleen Cascudo. I'm a parent trainer and advocate here at PACER. I am going on 3 years. I have 3 children, 2 of whom have disabilities, and they have been on IEP since they were 3 years old. I've sat in special education meetings as a parent, as an educator. I really learned the importance of knowing my rights, kind of how to speak the language for the best outcomes for my children's needs.
And I'm Robbie Weil. I've been here for 7 years after 35 years as a teacher, mostly 4th and 5th grade. That's the sweet spot to me. 2 of my now grown children actually received services within special education in the world of 504s. I never knew to contact PACER. As a teacher, I thought I understood the process, and I literally spent my first month at PACER crying in the car on the way home, second guessing how I had done things and wondering if my children's trajectories could have been different. And that's why I give grace to parents. We don't know what we don't know, and we're glad at whatever point in the process parents come to us. And I'm very passionate about helping parents know how to be that collaborative and equal member of their child's IEP team. So our focus today is commuting effectively with the IEP team when you're advocating for your child's educational needs, but specifically around bullying concerns. And my slides are advancing themselves. So hang on a sec. Ah! Um, and again, every situation is different, and these are very sensitive topics, can be traumatic not only for students, but also for their families. So we are not sharing examples. We will have a short Q&A at the end, but we're only going to answer very general questions about the process, not about any specific situations. And we do suggest that you reach out directly to speak with an advocate. We will give you information on how to do that later. Our goal is that you come away knowing your rights, as well as the processes and options that will create a path forward as you navigate these highly charged situations. Our YouTube channel has an archived workshop specifically on effective communication strategies. It's worth checking out. We're going to review those 10 tips, but your resources do contain a link to the full workshop. And then the rest of the workshop, we will focus on how you respond to your child, how to report to the school, and bullying and the IEP, what role it has and how they are connected.
We're going to talk a little bit about the 10 strategies of effective communication. We know that not all of you watching today necessarily have children on IEPs or 504s. However, with few exceptions, these strategies can still be helpful for parents of all that are part of that triangle of service. So you think of that parent, teacher, child, and the education system. So first, we want to talk about speaking the language. Education in general has its own lingo. You always have the right to have anything explained to you. It is not a sign of weakness to ask for something to be put into layman's terms. Teachers often forget that they have their own terms and phrasing, and they may not be readily understood by parents. There is no shortage of acronyms in this business. I assure you of that. Next strategy we like to talk about is putting it in writing. So much miscommunication comes from assuming that our messaging was clear. Using specific forms when necessary, or even following up a conversation with an email stating your understanding of a conversation, it allows people the time to clarify and when they realize what was said and was not interpreted in a way that was intended. You want to stay engaged with your child's team, whether they're on an IEP or not. Reaching out before school to build a relationship with their teacher, asking clarifying questions anytime you have a concern, attending conferences. All of these are strategies that can lead to a better outcome. School staff spend a lot of time with their students and are often in a position to see how they interact with peers, notice patterns of behavior, and recognize classroom dynamics. Be sure to check in with them often. This can be done through email. By establishing this relationship and building a partnership, you will be able to share not only your educational questions, but also talk through any concerns about social interaction that might involve bullying. When ongoing emails and discussions are not enough, you have the right to ask for a meeting. Make sure you are prepared. This is respectful of everyone's time. As part of our ongoing support and training at PACER, we often help parents prepare an agenda for what they want to discuss. Stating the problem and asking for help in finding a solution can help move things towards a positive way. Respect that everyone's perspective is their truth. Listen without judging, ask for clarification when needed, and using words that are descriptive and objective is less likely to put someone on the defensive and can lead to more productive conversations. Staying focused on your concern can also lead to better discussions. Stating I want or my child needs can also put people on the defensive as they counteroffer what they believe needs to happen and what you believe should happen. Disagreeing is not the same as being disagreeable. And in a meeting, you have the right to share your perspectives, but you also have the responsibility to listen to the perspective of others. However, when we refer to the right to disagree in our effective communication strategy, that is primary in reference to the changes to your child's IEP using due process procedures and paperwork. And we'll address the IEP towards the end of this presentation.
So, if you're in a relationship with another human being, whether it's a good friend or just someone who sits next to you in school, chances are pretty good, or even someone you work with all the time, chances are pretty good that you will be in conflict with that person at some point. And where there are two people in a relationship, there are going to be disagreements and changes. As adults, we often self-monitor our behavior and generally stop when we realize we are hurting someone. Understanding the feelings of others and the impact your actions can have is part of maturing. Conflict, especially in schools, is an opportunity for learning and growing. So, what is bullying? Bullying is a negative behavior directed by someone exerting power and control over another person. Bullying is when someone aggressively uses that power to target another individual with repeated, unwanted words or actions. Those being targeted are hurt either physically or emotionally and have a hard time stopping what is happening to them. When bullying children continue their behavior when they realize it's hurting someone and are satisfied by, when bullying children continue their behavior and are satisfied by that feeling of power that they have. Many definitions indicate that bullying is repeated or chronic, with the behavior directed at an individual over a period of time. However, the reality is that bullying can also be circumstantial, the result of a single situation, such as a social media post that reaches thousands. There are situations where adults may see behaviors but not respond. They may not see the patterns. They may not understand the depth. They may buy into the old idea that it's just part of childhood, or they simply may not know how to respond. But it is also important that children who engage in these behaviors often know that what they are doing is not okay. And the older they get, the better they get at engaging in these behaviors kind of under the radar. We like to use the word target as opposed to victim. The term victim kind of implies that someone has no power and is helpless to change what is happening to them. Although those targeted by bullying can feel powerless to stop it, labeling someone as a victim suggests that that person was, is, and will continue to be helpless and without option. Using a more neutral term, such as target, implies the possibility of change in the bullying situation and empowers the person being bullied to feel that they can do something to alter their situation. When youth are labeled as victims, this can send the message that they are weak or deserving of pity from others. Actually, they may need to help stop the situation and manage the bullying and need the tools and support to advocate for themselves. We also refer to the someone who is doing the bullying as the person who bullies as opposed to the bully. Bullying is a behavior, not an identity, and labeling a student as a bully can have a detrimental effect on their future and often limits their ability to change their behavior. Students can have multiple roles. They can be the one subjected to bullying and the one who bullies. Strategies that focus on holding students accountable for their behavior, but also empower them to change that behavior, are more effective than punitive punishments and peer mediation in bullying situations. The roles of target and initiator are relatively easy, excuse me, to understand. But the children who witness bullying have an incredibly powerful role in the situation. They can make it worse by joining in the bullying, encouraging the behavior, or escalating the situation, or they can make it much, much better for the target. Some bystanders directly intervene by discouraging the person bullying, defending the target, or redirecting the situation away from bullying. Other bystanders get help by rallying support from peers to stand up against bullying or by reporting to the adults. Students are powerful in these situations because they often know about the bullying long before the adults do. They know the culture of their school and who is vulnerable. They usually don't like the bullying but aren't sure how to help. They often see this bullying as an issue they can make their own. If they can act with support, they are a powerful group to engage. By showing support for the target, or even by just not joining in on the bullying, bystanders can change the course of the situation. Nearly 60% of bullying situations will end when a peer intervenes. When your child sees bullying happen, they can make a difference.
Bullying can negatively impact a child's access to education, and it can lead to school avoidance and higher rates of absenteeism, decrease in grades, inability to concentrate, loss of interest in academic achievement, and increase in dropout rates. Bullying can also lead to physical and mental health problems, including headaches and stomach aches, sleeping problems, low self esteem, increased fear or anxiety, depression, and post traumatic stress. Bullying also impacts students' sense of safety and well being, such as self isolation, increased aggression, self harm and suicidal ideation, feeling of alienation at school, fear of other students, and retaliation.
So, what do you do when your child reports that they are being bullied? This is not the time to discuss perspectives or antecedents. Just listen, do not discount. Support your child and clarify conflict versus bullying. When you discover your child is being bullied, you may feel a variety of emotions yourself, from anger to fear to sadness. These reactions and emotional responses are natural for parents who want their child to feel valued, protected, and loved. To become an effective advocate for your child, it is important to acknowledge your own emotions and then focus on developing an action plan to help your child. Reinforce that it is not their fault. They are not to blame. They are not alone. You are there to help. It is the adult's responsibility to make the bullying stop. Bullying is never okay, and they have the right to be safe. No one deserves to be bullied. They deserve to be treated with respect and the right to feel safe at school. Here are some reactions to avoid. Telling your child to stand up to the bully. This can imply that it is your child's responsibility to handle the situation. And while there is a ring of truth to this statement, being assertive is often a good response. Sending your child back into the situation without further information will probably cause more harm. A more effective response is to brainstorm options with your child about what you can do as a team to respond to the situation. Do not tell your child to ignore the bully. Again, this is easier than said than done. Your child has probably tried ignoring the situation, which is a typical response for children. And if that method had been effective, there wouldn't be a need for the child to seek your help. It's difficult to ignore someone who is sitting behind you on the bus or next to you in class. In addition, if the student who is bullying realizes that their target is purposefully ignoring them, it can actually ignite further bullying, since that response is what they're looking for, that sense of power and control. Do not take matters into your own hands. A normal gut response from parents is to try to fix the situation and remove their child from harm. For example, a parent might call the parents of the student who is bullying or directly confront the bully. Remember, when children tell a parent about bullying, they are looking for the parent to guide them to a solution that makes them feel empowered. Involving them in the process of determining next steps is important. Typically, calling the other parent or directly confronting the bullying student is ineffective. I can speak to this personally, but the time I marched over to a child's house and said to the mother, "This needs to stop," it did not go well. It can also be a shock to discover that your child has engaged in bullying behaviors. Reframing the focus from labeling a child as a bully to referring them as a child with bullying behavior recognizes that capacity for change. Talk with your child. Children may not always recognize the behavior as bullying. They may see it as just having fun and not realize the impact it has on another child. Help them understand what defines bullying and emphasize that this behavior is never appropriate. Explore the reasons for the behavior. Find out why your child is behaving in a manner that is harmful to others through an open, non-judgmental discussion. Here are some helpful tips. Children who bully often lack awareness of how others feel or understand how their actions impact. Try to understand your child's feelings and help them appreciate how others feel when they are bullied. Let your child know that everyone has feelings and that the feelings matter. It may be that your child is engaging in these behaviors because they are also experiencing them. In terms of writing, the student handbook, every school has a bullying prevention policy. It often includes a form or path to report, and putting it in writing creates a paper trail. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
So when we look back at our effective tips, our effective communication tips, it's always important to keep a written record. We have a huge saying here at Pacer, and I'm sure it's pretty popular everywhere. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And to be clear, the content should include written information about bullying incidents, date of the event, persons involved, child's account of the event. Now, just as Robbie mentioned, every school district has their own policy in regards to bullying. Not only is there a district policy, but there's also school policies in regards to bullying. Many are saying when they want to report bullying, there's a form that needs to be filled out. It's easily accessible. You can do both. Do their form and you can do this form as well. Pacer Center has created templates for letters that contain standard language and fill in the blank spaces. So the letter can be customized for your child's situation, as seen here. They include information that will notify the administrator in writing, address the notification to a specific person, date the letter, describe the incidents with dates, and you can refer back to all your records, and state what you would like the school to do. Sending a letter serves two purposes. First, the letter will alert school administration of the bullying and your desire for interventions against the bullying. Second, the letter can serve as your written record when referring to events. The record or letter should be factual and absent of opinions or emotional statements. In any meeting that follow up written reports, keep in mind that it is important to assume best intentions. Teachers and other adults do not intentionally decide to ignore bullying behaviors. They may not see the patterns. They may not understand the depth, and they may buy into old ideas that this is part of childhood, or they may simply not know how to respond. Be willing to listen and respect that the school may share with you a different perspective. Describe your concerns and incidences and stay solution-oriented.
So the steps that we are discussing, emails, formal reports, meetings, are not just a good idea, but are actually supported by Minnesota state statute. The Safe and Supportive School Act states that all students deserve to attend a school where they can feel safe and free of bullying and harassment. And this law specifically provides school districts guidance to create and enforce school policies around bullying. In addition, this law requires that schools have a policy that meets the minimum requirements, include in the policy clear definitions of bullying and other prohibited behaviors, develop specific procedures for initial response and reporting, investigate all reports of bullying, provide strategies to support students involved in bullying, designate a school staff person as a primary contact for bullying situations, and provide professional development and education. As always, knowledge is power. Know your school's policy. Typically, they are labeled under bullying prevention policy. Sometimes they're found in the family or student handbook, other times on the district website. Look through that handbook. The policy may be referenced there as well, but it is important, however you do it, to familiarize yourself with these documents. In addition to your own record keeping and letter writing, many districts have a printable or online reporting form. It may seem redundant, but you want to be sure that you have reported the incidents in the way that the district requests. Sometimes parents or guardians don't feel like the response they get from the school is adequate. For privacy reasons, you will probably not be told how the situation was investigated or how any other students were dealt with. But if you are concerned that a school district or school has failed to address bullying, or that a school district or school is not complying with the Safe and Supportive Schools law, you can contact MDE to discuss making a formal complaint. Oh my goodness. Go back. Sorry. Go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, so one of my favorite strategies that I share with families pretty much every day is to focus on the problem and not the solution. I think most of the calls that we get here, that is the number one strategy we use. The IEP can be a helpful tool in a bullying prevention plan. Remember, every child receiving special education is entitled to free and appropriate public education, or FAPE. That is a really good acronym to remember. And bullying can sometimes become an obstacle to receiving that education and their participation in school. The IEP team, which includes the parent, can identify evidence-based strategies that may be written into the IEP to help stop the bullying. It may be helpful to involve the child, when appropriate, in the decision-making process and to think about strategies that include identifying an adult in the school who the child can report to, determining how the school staff will document and report all incidences. And that's also thinking about, how do you want to be contacted about those incidences? Allowing the child to leave class early and to avoid hallway incidences. Holding separate in-services for school staff and classroom peers to help them understand a child's disability. Educating peers about school district policies on bullying behavior, and ensuring regular reassurance from the school staff to the student that he or she has a right to be safe and the bullying is not his or her fault. Shadowing of the student who has been bullied, where school staff can shadow the student in the hallways, classrooms, or playgrounds. All of which are appropriate things that can be put into the IEP for more protection.
And I just want to notice we don't have on here, and I've done this a lot recently, where part of the issue is that if depending on a child's disability, they may not know how to advocate for themselves. They may not know how to even share when these things are happening. And that's where I have actually seen goals added to IEPs after some serious bullying incidents about teaching that child how to advocate for themselves. Again, that does not stand alone. Um, it still needs to be dealt with, but sometimes that can be added as well. So we have so many resources on the National Bullying Prevention Center. And I will tell you just a funny story. So I said I taught for 35 years. I engaged in Unity Day many times. There was a week in October. We did some special lessons. I was given some extra materials. We would all wear orange. Um, and I didn't know until I came to Pacer that that all came out of Pacer Center. And actually, it's tomorrow, right, Colleen? Is Unity Day this year?
I don't, it moves, so I don't know.
I
I
know
know
it's this week. This is
my
the
child's
week.
school is like next week. They looped it. So I think every district that wants to do theirs differently,
A
but
little bit different. But
yeah.
it is a time to just focus on these things. There, under the kids tab, there are wonderful things that kids can read through to feel less alone, to see how other children have dealt with what is happening. There's a whole section, as you can see, about do you bully? So if a child is realizing, gosh, I don't know that I'm really being who I want to be, it can help them. There are lesson plans for teachers, and then again, a page for teenagers as well. So a very, very strong and wonderful resource. Sorry about that. Um, whoop, sorry. Um, worth checking out.
So this is information about us, the advocates. You can ask an advocate here at Pacer Center. Again, usually we have a Q&A section at a lot of our workshops. Because of the nature of a bullying conversation, we're only going to take questions at this time that are really specific to the process of special education and addressing bullying here. So if you have questions at this time, you can put it in the Q&A. But again, we cannot go into like very specific situations, in regards to bullying. Sometimes there's just not really the place for it. And that's why we ask for you to contact Pacer. This is our Ask an Advocate form. You can scan the QR code. Visit us at pacer.org. We have a brand new website that is super amazing and clean and helpful. But again, you can ask an advocate form right there. Tell us a little bit about what your situation is, and you'll get connected to an advocate. I think within like 48 hours, you would hear back from someone.
Typically.
And then we can help you understand next steps in the process, and that is our role here. So at this time, even if you have a question that is very specific to the process of either reporting bullying or special education, this is the time for that. But again, we really do encourage you to reach out to Pacer. You can ask to speak with an advocate. We can walk you through. When you contact Pacer, be specific as to your child's age and disability. That kind of helps determine which advocate could be of more assistance than others. I think that is also a really good helpful tip.
And I just wanted to share one other thing from a teacher's perspective. I had a situation, and I think I was a very proactive and responsive teacher. When there was an issue between my students in my classroom, the first thing I would say was, wow, take a look at their face. How do you think that felt to them? And encouraging that other. So a lot of positive things I believe went on in my classroom. But I did have an issue. And I guess this is a caveat that the teachers should have known. There was a very serious issue going on in my classroom that I had no idea of. I had a group of kids who would come in and say, "Oh, we have a magic number today. Great. What's the number? Let's talk about it." I'd put it up on the board. And then for, warm-ups in math, if they finished, how many different ways can what different sentences can you write to come up with this number? Um, it wasn't for about a month that what we discovered is that this group of students was tracking how many times they made a child with student needs who was very, very, they had a difficult time regulating their emotions, how many times they made that child cry. I was devastated. I had no idea because these were fifth graders, and fifth graders knew when to talk about it and when not to. Um, So that's why when you hear these things, the first step is to gather information, contact the school, report it, have a conversation to try to suss out what is actually happening. And again, that goes to like, here is the problem as opposed to you didn't know this, you didn't watch out for my child. Um, we always suggest you assume best intent unless you have proof otherwise, and being hard on the problem but easy on the people. And I am seeing no questions, so
Mm,
I think
no.
we'll are people signing off, Colleen, or we still have a fair number
Yeah,
here?
there's some dropping off, not too many.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the time if you have any general questions about what we've presented here. Um, Otherwise, we're going to assume that we've set you in a good path with ways to find additional information and ways to get support if your child is experiencing this on either side. And if there are no questions, going once, going twice. Ah,
Oh, there we go.
thank you. Yes, I think with everything, I'm sorry, Colleen, I'm jumping in.
Yeah, go
Um,
for it.
I think that for everything, your case manager is your point person. Always. When parents call me, I always say, "What have you tried so far?" and have you contacted the case manager? Um, so very, very important. That is your person, right? In
Mhm.
all things around special education. Mhm.
Okay, there was a question, how do I get the transcript? I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming your school transcript or the
Oh, I
transcript
think
of
they
your
mean of
kid.
the workshop.
Um, I
We
don't know.
No, we do put it on. It will be
Yeah,
posted online on our YouTube channel. We don't send out a transcript, but you should have gotten or will be getting the slides with spots to write.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
You clarified.
Well, just clarify down there too.
How about how do I teach my child what a friend is and what bullying behavior is? My child is confused. I would highly encourage you to look at those resources on the National Bullying Prevention page. They have resources from preschool, early childhood, all the way through high school. Just, all different social stories, visuals, how do I teach my child to be the friend? What if my child is the bully? Right? They have resources that kind of take apart each one of those situations. And how, as a parent, do I work through this? Right? Because sometimes Google is my assistant parent. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? Help me. So I highly encourage you to reach out to those websites. Um, there is some really, really great resources there. There's picture book resources, again, social stories, visuals, all sorts of, and then information for you on how best to have those kind of conversations.
There's a question here about what if the child doesn't know their names? That's okay. You still, and again, if your child's on IEP, contact the case manager. If not, usually the first point person is the teacher to try to gather more data. Um, because that's what you need to do to be able to figure out how to first you have to identify the problem before you can find a solution.
There's a question in here about younger kids at pre-K to K who may be unable to express anything that we can do as parents. I think in those kind of situations, having a really good relationship with your child's team is important. Whether it's weekly communication of how the week went, asking kind of those clarifying questions of like, well, who did they sit with at snack today? Or, who do they play with on the playground? That's kind of easy ways for you to get that information without digging in too deep. Um, but in those situations when you have these younger students and they're perhaps nonverbal and I can understand your concern there. That team, those are your people. So that case manager, that gen ed teacher, the paras in the room, I would be reaching out with them. Some things that can be put in place is a communication log. So if you don't have one of those, I would ask for one that can be put into your accommodation section of your IEP. When you're just asking, it's information. What do I need to know about my kiddo's day? And it's not something that doesn't take more than 2 minutes to fill out. From the staffing point of view, quick thing, these are what I enjoyed, this is who I played with. But that's an easy way to kind of get some more information about your child's day.
There's a question here about where both children may have a disability. And so that's where there's a huge opportunity. Again, when you present with the problem, there's a huge opportunity for learning on both sides. Many kids with disabilities are vulnerable. Children who are neurodivergent or have communication differences can be very vulnerable. And that's where sharing the problem gives you the opportunity to say, how do we support in all different ways? So again, some children do discount what may actually be bullying because that person is giving them attention. But that can be taught. That's part of teaching a vulnerable child, as we talked about earlier, what it means to be a friend. Um, and again, this can all be addressed in the IEP through social skills, through social interactions. The other thing that I want to point out, especially with younger children, is that sometimes, kids will use that word. Kids use the words that they hear. I had a child once when I originally taught preschool, pre-K, who said, I'm depressed. Like, well, you're sad, and I can see that. Let's talk about that. Not every child who is sad is struggling with depression. Um, Not to discount that sometimes that is true, but the same with bullying. When kids say, I'm being bullied, that's why the first thing you do is listen. Kids can be mean. Kids can say unkind things, but bullying is that ongoing pattern when a child has been asked to stop, or some of those more egregious behaviors when it's done on social media and the impact is very large. But again, y- I don't know. I think Colleen and I both, as former teachers, would say everything is a learning experience. Everything is an option or an opportunity to learn something. And if we approach it like that, um, that only helps in the long run. Helps everybody.
Trying to scroll through these, I think. What kind of evidence-based strategies are
Mm.
recommended for IEP students to plan with parents?
As many as there are children with IEPs.
Yeah, I mean, there's millions of evidence-based strategies out there. I think it really comes down to, independent situation. Every child is different, every situation is different, and it comes down to those needs. What needs is your child showing? And then what strategies does the team have to help kind of support that need? That need is always what should always be found in your IEP, or what those educational needs are. The IEP is the muscle behind it. How are we going to support those needs? So again, kind of like the strategies that we talked about. Like Robbie mentioned also, that self-advocacy goal is always a huge, huge piece of just how do we teach that self-advocacy. But everyone has different levels of where do we start, right? Some have the ability to ask for help, some do not. Some are not even, able to talk with their grown-up to say this is what happened. So it really is just focusing in with your team on, this is the problem, how can you all help, right? That is, how do we get there? What strategies do you have to make him feel safe, and supported at school?
And I always remind parents that I is for individualized, and it's not that we're trying to shy away from giving you
Right.
specific, but truthfully, there are about as many strategies as there are kids with needs.
Mhm.
Anything else? Thank you for keeping our brains working.
I think that, okay, so do you want this one, Robbie?
Sure. I assume this may be coming from a professional. How will we monitor progress and communicate regularly with the family? Again, I feel like I'm kind of shying away from an answer. It depends on the child. It depends what's happening. I think that open communication is so important. I think asking the parent, do you want me to check in weekly? Do you want me to check in daily for these first few weeks? Let's set up a meeting in a month. What makes sense and what does the parent need? Because parents' needs are individualized as well. Some parents don't want to hear every day. Some parents do, and managing those expectations with what makes sense. And monitoring progress, if you're talking about in a goal, then of course that's part of the IEP process. If you're talking about is it going down, I would suggest, maybe having lunch with that kiddo every so often. How are things going? We talked about this. Are things going better? Um, just checking in and keeping your eyes on it is the important part. You're welcome.
Thanks. That is it for now. Again, please reach out to Pacer with any of your specific questions or concerns. I'm more than happy to connect with you.
You will be getting a resource page that includes a link to that full workshop about effective communication tips, several of our guides, and more of those bullying resources. So, thank you for being here.